What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you an updated look at my 2022 NFL Draft Big Board. Excited to bring this video to you. Hopefully you all enjoy it, and if you do, hit that like button. It'll help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more sports content, more draft content in specific, hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, most importantly, comment your takeaways in the comment section. Who do you think I have too high? Who do you think I have too low? Who's maybe not on this list that you think should be in my top 50? Love to have some of your thoughts down in the comment section. Love to talk some football with you. Additionally, give me some feedback. You'll see a comment next to Aiden Hutchinson's name. That's a typo on my end, but part of the reason it's there is I didn't know if I wanted to put their position right next to the name or maybe even the school. Figured if you're looking at big boards, you're a little bit deeper into the draft community, if you will. Therefore, you know who Aiden Hutchinson is. You know who your Kaiir Elam is. And I didn't need to put position in school. But if you think I should, maybe liven up the screen a little bit with that information, let me know down in the comment section. Love to have your thoughts. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeaux, my top two players. I decided to switch Hutchinson number one, partially because the way I think you could break this tie, if you will, these two players are about as close as it gets for that number one spot. It comes down to, do you weigh your recency bias a little bit more or your priors? And I don't mean that in any negative connotation. I think my recency bias is a little bit stronger than my priors. Hutchinson, I saw the developmental curve really break through this year, coming back from the leg injury, and he looks like a guy who can win with finesse. He's great with his hands. He can win with strength. He can bull rush you. He's a complete pass rusher. While I think Thibodeaux is a little bit more raw, Oregon didn't fully develop him like Michigan could with Hutchinson. I think they're both scheme versatile guys, and they potentially could be the first two picks on the board once we get to the NFL draft itself. So I don't think either team is going to be upset with whoever they end up with of these two, but I think because I think Hutchinson's slightly more NFL ready right now, a little bit more developed, I have a number one with Thibodeaux behind him at number two, but it's really, like I said, 1A, 1B. Evan Neal, you're going to hear me describe positions that and the traits that come with it that I value the most, and on top of Evan Neal having great tape, and he's the left tackle for the number one team in the country, all that puts together a great resume. He's played left and right tackle. He's played guard. I love offensive linemen who can play multiple positions, have history of being able to do that, and that's exactly why you'll see Kenyon Green. We'll talk about him once we get to number 10, which I'm not going to talk about every player, but we'll talk about some of the big ones as we go through the board. But Neal, standout player. He's had success everywhere he's gone. He plays for a great program with a great track record of producing NFL talent. He's kind of a no-brainer. Thinks it makes a ton of sense in my eyes that the Jags had the opportunity to take him in the top three as a potential Cam Robinson replacement. I think a lot of teams would be happy with Evan Neal on their roster. Then we get to Kyle Hamilton. I mean, he's a safety that can do it all. He could be your slot corner. He's good enough in man coverage for that. He could be your deep safety. He could be a box safety. He's someone who can blitz. And in a lot of ways, I was just recording this after the day after the Vikings-Steelers game. And it's not just because Harrison Smith went to Notre Dame, Kyle Hamilton is going to be leaving Notre Dame to head to the draft. But they make me think of each other in very versatile ways because you can use them in so many different areas, right? They're such well-rounded football players. You can give offenses a lot of different looks. That said, Hamilton is by far a superior athlete compared to where Harrison Smith is, especially at this point in his career. But you can use them as a queen on a chessboard. And because of that, you can make offenses' lives really, really complicated because you just don't know where he's going to be. And you have to account for a player like Kyle Hamilton. Derek Stingley Jr. down a few spots for my last big board. The injury, didn't play out the rest of this year, and he hasn't been as good as he was in 2019, but I still see someone who's, 6'1", has the weight to go with it, can play press, he can play man zone, electric with the ball in his hand, so he's good both in kick return situations, but also once he creates turnovers, he can make big things happen afterwards. I think Derek Stingley Jr. has the potential to be a cornerback one. He is the complete package. He'll run in the 4.3s at his pro day in the combine. There's not a whole lot of misses other than his developmental curve is a little backwards, right? If the 2019 season was this year and some of the lesser years, this year and last year were freshman and sophomore year, you'd be looking at him as a potential top 2 to 3 player in this board. But because of the way it's seen, it's not as flattering for Stingley Jr.'s draft stock. Ikem Ekwonu, I put him in the top 6, and I think he's probably the last blue chipper. I think 1 through 6 here are probably my blue chip guys. I think regardless of what you see as a need, if there's only one of these 6 on the board, you take them. I don't care. Best player available, you need to address that. And Ikem Ekwonu has proven that he can play left tackle, and I'm fully sold. I think he could be a left tackle at the next level. That said, he also could play guard for, let's say, the New York Giants if he ends up in their lap. You kick him inside, you've now seen that he is a really polished pass protector in a lot of ways, and then you know what you're getting in the run game, and that's a really scary proposition. So if there's a team that maybe already knows what they have in the tackles or want to just flex Ikem Ekwonu inside to bolster their power run game, whatever the case may be, that is something that I think could be a really valuable tool and allows maybe an offense to open up what they're trying to do week in and week out. But Ikem Ekwonu, one of the biggest risers of my mock, or this big board, I should say. I think in the first one he was 33. Now he's up to 6, and I'm calling him a blue chipper. So he's definitely risen the ranks. George Karlaftis at 7. This dude is just a brute. And he's kind of fun in a different way compared to watching Hutchinson and Thibodeaux. Karlaftis is just a little more scrappy. Just does it with, I don't know how to perfectly describe it. I don't want to call it lunch pail because that's a little cliche, but high motor, and it just feels like until the play's done, Karlaftis is going to find a way to make an impact on that snap. Really enjoyed watching him, and the more I go back and review his tape, it feels like I like him a little bit more, and he may well become the next guy I say, hey, you know what? Blue chips are 1 through 7 as opposed to 1 through 6. I think he's knocking on the door. And someone else I could say the same thing with is Charles Cross. He's been one of the best left tackles in football, super high PFF, pass protecting grade, and he's fine in the run game. And he plays in an offense that forces him to pass protect more than just about any other offense in the country, Mississippi State, and that Mike Leach offense. So the sample size is large enough. The play's been really impressive. The curve checks out. He's gotten better year over year. He's a bit of a developmental project, and it feels like this year he's kind of hit his stride. So, big fan of Charles Cross. I think he'll make a team really happy in the NFL draft. I'd probably keep him at tackle once he got to the NFL level. Kaiir Elam, big Kaiir Elam fan. I mean, this is just, I love corners that are this 6'2 size, long arms. Elam will play you at the line of scrimmage. I know that first half against Samford wasn't pretty, but that is the only bad half of football I've been able to find Kaiir Elam playing this year. So I see he was a 6'2 shutdown number 1 corner in the making, and he plays in the SEC. He has taken away some of the best wide receivers in that conference, so big fan of Kaiir Elam for sure. And then Kenyon Green at number 10. This is a guy who's played all 5 offensive line positions, and I love versatility. This is a guy where if he was a faller in the draft and the Bengals found a way to get him, it would be match made in heaven. He could be your right tackle future. He could be a guard. You name it. You have a problem, Kenyon Green can fill that void, and that's something I find really intriguing. And not only has he played all these positions, guards, tackles, etc., he's done it at a pretty high level. And you got to think, it's got to be challenging knowing that your assignment essentially is changing week in and week out. Imagine once he not only gets to the NFL and he has more resources to be able to get stronger, and just you take that natural college to NFL leap as a player and your physical build and things like that. What could he do once he knows I'm a right tackle? Or I'm going to be a left guard. I'm going to be a left tackle for this team. And he can just hone in on being better at that position. I think that's a really scary proposition for teams who don't draft him. And I think he's going to make a team really, really happy if they do go ahead and draft Kenyon Green. On to the next list of names. Tyler Linderbaum. Probably, if you don't count Kenyon Green's an IOL, Linderbaum is as close to a safe bet as possible. I've heard some people say they think he could play guard. I think he's a little, quote-unquote, small. I mean, Linderbaum would obviously look like a monster compared to me, but I think he's going to be a center only, so because of that, he'll probably go lower than 11 because you're looking at a team like the Giants or the Bengals or the Dolphins, and, the need for center is naturally smaller compared to I need interior offensive linemen, someone who can play guard or center. So because of that, I think he'll be a little bit lower than 11, but this dude is NFL ready as it gets in this draft class. Got the Ohio State wide receivers here, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. They're still my top 2 wideouts in this class. Wilson, a little bit bigger size and has that natural win at the catch point ability because of it. Really physical player, but I think him and Olave both are home run threats, but can also show up in moments like third and 8 and need a first round. I think they're both good enough route runners to make that type of impact in a game where when you're in the fourth quarter and you need to move the chains, these guys can be more than just that 60-yard play waiting to happen. So I'm a big fan of both their games. Plus, they come from a school that has a good track record of producing wide receivers, which certainly helps. Nakobe Dean, another big riser. I mean, you name it, he does it. He can blitz. He's great in coverage. Unbelievable athlete. Plays on maybe the best defense in college football. And he feels like as many players as I can look at on that defense and say they're the anchor of it. Nakobe Dean feels like he truly could be considered that anchor of that defense, which obviously looks good on his part. Trent McDuffie, Andrew Booth Jr., 2 corners I like, and I was just, glamoring about how I like Kaiir Elam. I like those 6'2 corners. These guys a little bit smaller, 5'11 to 6 foot range. We'll find out more once we get the weigh-ins of the combine and their pro days. But two of the highest graded corners in PFF coverage grade. And Trent McDuffie, I think in specific, comes from a school that has a fantastic track record of producing cornerbacks in Washington. Sidney Jones has been a little up and down, but Byron Murphy looks like a for sure hit for the Cardinals. So that definitely boosts the resume, and it just feels like Trent McDuffie, if you leave him in man-to-man coverage, this dude's going to find a way to take away that number one option. And Andrew Booth Jr., a lot of the same here. It just feels like you have your corners that you're biased to in this class, and you're going to see a whole lot of corners on this list. I've seen Andrew Booth as high as 6 on certain big boards, which I totally can respect, because you watch Andrew Booth Jr. play, and there's nothing that he's doing wrong. I just think I'm a little more biased towards a Kaiir Elam over someone like Booth Jr., and I'm really enamored by Trent McDuffie as well. Jordan Davis at 17 doesn't play a whole lot of snaps necessarily for Georgia. He doesn't play the entire game, but what his niche is of taking away the run, he is not only built perfectly for it, but he is productive at doing that. He is proven to be a good run stopper, could split double teams, moves well for someone who's 6'6", 300 and whatever pounds. Again, waiting on the official measurements. I don't take a whole lot of the school website's word, all that to heart. But Jordan Davis is a freak, and not many players can win, Defensive Player of the Year and Best Interior Defensive Lineman in college football, and that's exactly what Jordan Davis does. So those awards speak for themselves. It's Marvin Leal right behind him, guy who's fallen a little bit, but I still see an NFL team falling in love with his athletic profile and his ability to be, hey, he could play 4-3 DN, he could be a 3-4 DN, he could be 4-3 D tackle. Maybe he could play some nose for us. He's done a whole lot of different things at A&M, and still a younger prospect, right? So there's that opportunity to get him on the upswing of his development. So I think that's an appetizing prospect for a lot of teams. So I think he'll be in the first round conversation. Jameson Williams, officially my wide receiver 3. He's more than just a speed threat. He's more than just that burner down the field. He's not just John Ross. He is so dynamic in screen games. He's so shifty. He can move left to right just as quick as he can go from 0 to 100. Big fan of Jameson Williams, and a guy who can get open. Now, I think he relies on his speed and his burst, natural God-given ability there a little bit more than like Wilson Olave. I think those two might be a little technically more sound, better footwork than Williams. But there's not a whole lot of separation between the two, and Williams does have the speed element that maybe Wilson and Olave aren't quite at. So big fan of Jameson Williams, done some great things with Bama. Does help playing with Bryce Young, playing in an offense with a former NFL head coach as your OC. All those things are definitely benefiting him this year and have risen his stock exponentially. Matt Corral, my first quarterback. I don't love this quarterback class. I don't think anybody really does. I like Corral for a team that thinks they have a roster that can win now. We'll talk about my next QB on the list. Similar sort of archetype where I think a team like the Saints, the Steelers, the Washington football team, depending on what happens with Russell Wilson and maybe if they keep Pete Carroll, Seattle could be in this conversation. But teams that think they have a roster that can win now, but maybe can't afford to go out there and financially pay someone like whatever Russell Wilson's contract has due, almost $40 million, I believe, next year, or don't want to pay a Deshaun Watson, don't want to wait for that legal situation, or aren't in the runnings for an Aaron Rodgers, and then don't want to settle for Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick, whatever this offseason, and are forced to the draft. They might say, hey, Matt Corral or Kenny Pickett, who's the next QB we'll talk about, they could say, hey, these guys are 23, going to be turning 24. They're a little bit older, more college football experience under their belt. They are the quarterback that we can go to as a cheap option, but also because they've played so much football, they give us the best chance to win right now. So I think there's going to be some teams that use that rationale to take Matt Corral, and I think ultimately he'll be the first quarterback off the board. Get to Pickett, he's at 25. David Ojabo, guy's been playing football for 5 years, athletic freak. Michigan has found their stride recruiting these edge rushers between Kwity Paye last year, Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo. They're starting to be able to churn out these uber athletic types and then turn them into polished edge rushers. Ojabo a little bit further away from where Hutchinson is as a finished product and where we're seeing Kwity Paye at right now for the Colts. But considering he's only been playing for half a decade, the developmental curve there for Ojabo is unbelievable. This guy has the ceiling, the potential that any team wants in the first round, and because of that, he'll be a first-round pick. Roger McCray, another one of these corners that's sub 6 foot, but I think he might have the highest PFF coverage grade, and honestly, I'm surprised I didn't put him higher, and once we get to Big Board 3.0, I definitely think McCreary will rise up. He was a huge reason why Auburn was able to slow down and fared, honestly, as good as any defense against Bama's offense. And it's because McCreary was lining up against John Mechie, Jameson Williams, and shutting those guys down. And you've already heard me glamour about Williams. And, Mechie's not on this list, but that's largely because of the ACL injury. Roger McCreary is a stud, and if he goes to a man-heavy scheme, New England, maybe a Tennessee, maybe in Arizona, I think he'll fit in perfectly and be a great addition to that secondary. Ahmad Sauce Gardner, 6'2", long arms. The only thing that holds him back is he comes from a Power 5 school. I know they're in the college football playoff, and hey, if Sauce Gardner is following Jameson Williams around in the college football playoff and he shuts him down, check out for Ahmad Gardner to skyrocket into the top 10, because that's the type of matchup we haven't gotten to see a whole lot of, given his matchups and who he's played this year. If he goes out and does it against a guy who I have as wide receiver 3, that will improve his stock exponentially. Devin Lloyd, maybe not as freaky an athlete as Nakobe Dean, but has it all between the ears, and in a lot of ways makes me think of Bobby Wagner, just because he plays the game so sound and so technically right, and he just puts himself in the right position at all times. Really smart football player, and that's what you want in that inside linebacker position. Kenny Pickett talked about it a little bit with Matt Corral. I think a team is going to see him as he's a little bit older, and he cleaned up his footwork. I'm not a big Kenny Pickett guy because it took so long for him to become relevant. I say that for people who aren't necessarily big college football fans. You wouldn't know who the name Kenny Pickett is until this year, and I gotta give him credit. Earned some points in my book with that fake slot. I'm really annoyed that that's now against the rules in college football. But Kenny Pickett was onto something with that. That was clean. But that said, he did clean up his footwork this year, so you're seeing a little bit more zip on every pass he delivers, and naturally has made him a little bit more accurate. So there has been some progression there, and again, I think a team's going to see him as he's going to be a 24 when he's playing as a rookie. He can help us take advantage, if you're Washington, of our great defense. Or for Pittsburgh, same sort of deal. Or for the Saints, we got players on big contracts that are stars. Kenny Pickett might be the quarterback that helps us get back into the postseason. Drake Jackson from USC, him and Kingsley Enagbare look like NFL pass rushers. It hasn't always been pretty for these two, but it's one of those things where I think, especially the back half of the first round, this 26-27 range, a team that has a track record of producing and maturing edge rushers will love to see Drake Jackson or Kingsley Enagbare on the board. I think they're still a little raw by NFL standards, but they have the body, they have the athletic build, and once we get to their pro days and their combines and we see some of those numbers pour in, I think they're guys that'll naturally start to rise up people's big boards. Jordan Battle, he's my number 2 safety in this class, and I'm still in love with how Battle makes it look so easy. Very Xavier McKinney-like. He is not the world's greatest athlete, but man, free, strong, man, zone, helping the run, helping in the you name it. Jordan Battle can do it, and he's just like Devin Lloyd. Puts himself in the right spot, has a nose for the football, and making plays. Big fan of Jordan Battle here. Drake London, Treylon Burks. You get these big body wide receivers, and they both have been able to expand their game coming into the season. My first big board video, I was saying these guys do it from the slot, and they're picking on most of the time teams' number 3 corners, just because that's still a little of the archaic ways in which college football is played. But now these guys have been able to work from the outside and shown they can do it in both spots. And not only are they winning from the catch point, I think both of their skills as a route runner and getting open has improved exponentially. Drake London was the highest graded PFF wide receiver this year, and Treylon Burks, especially at the beginning of the year when Arkansas was a big story until they hit Georgia, basically. That offense looked fantastic, and Burks was a big reason why. But anyways, we're on to the 30s. Let's talk about Malik Willis, and he is my quarterback 3, and he is just one of those guys where I chase traits when it comes to quarterbacks, and that's why, back when I had a radio show and I was in college, didn't have this channel, Josh Allen was my number 1 prospect on the board, because if everything panned out, he gave you the most dynamic look on offense, and I think he gave you the highest upside. And you could argue whether if you think he's the best quarterback in that draft class or not. We'll talk about that in the comment section. But Malik Willis is more of the same, right? This guy's going to be around the 4.3, 4.4 mark in his 40 at the Pro Day and Combine, and an absolute bazooka for an arm. If he goes to the right situation with an offensive coordinator or even a head coach that can put him in a spot where he can learn how to read defenses properly, he can clean up his mechanics and become a more accurate passer in turn, and learn how to control that arm, and then gets into an offense where, I wish Trey Lance hadn't been the 3rd overall pick last year for San Francisco, because I just think about, Kyle Shanahan with Malik Willis, that would be scary. Maybe Sean Payton, if he's able to sign a bridge quarterback in free agency. This could be something where it's, hey, we're going to sit Willis for a year, and Sean Payton's going to make Malik Willis the next big thing in the NFL. That is super intriguing. we'll have to see. This is going to be very situationally based on if I like where Willis goes, but when it comes to upside, it's Malik Willis. He gives you the best, not only potential with his dual threat ability, being able to run it and throw it, arm strength. I think there's an argument he might have the strongest arm of anybody in this draft class, and additionally, what he could do schematically. He opens up the playbook to a whole new realm, and that is part of why I love Malik Willis, and that's part of what I liked about Josh Allen. He is so dynamic and so dual threat driven that it's a part of their identity, and you can just go crazy with the playbook and scheming things up. Number 32, Jermaine Johnson, the second name that's starting to get hot, edge rusher from Florida State. School that feels like it hasn't totally tapped into developing players, but I think it has gotten slightly better with Coach Norvell. But Jermaine Johnson's certainly a name that's starting to get hot. 6'5", 260, kind of gives you that look of an NFL edge rusher. It's going to be interesting to see how this edge class starts to refine itself and starts to become more understood of who's where, who's edge one, or we know who the top two edge rushers are, who's edge three, who's edge 4, 5, et cetera, et cetera. Once we get those athletic numbers in and we know how these bodies might project the next level. Daxton Hill, a safety from Michigan, can play strong, he can play free. A lot of people have him at safety too. Can't knock it. I'm just a little bit bigger of a fan of Jordan Battle, great athlete, super smart football player. And Michigan's defense has been fantastic, and a large part is due to Daxton Hill's play. Darian Kendrick, Clemson transferred to Georgia. He's played both in the ACC and the SEC. That's awesome for the resume. He's played at two of the best programs over the last half decade, and Clemson's defenses used to be stacked while he was there, and now Georgia's defense looks, unless you're playing Alabama, looks unbelievable. So Darian Kendrick, certainly a guy who would be a great value here. End of the first round, early second. It's a deep cornerback class. These guys are going to fall, and I think Kendrick will make a team very happy with that value. Jaquan Brisker, a lot of the same things I said about Daxton Hill could be applied to Brisker just at Northwestern. Big fan of his game, and I think this is a really good safety class, so there's a lot of really quality guys, and a lot of them have that dual safety ability, right? You can play free or strong, and again, kind of like we talked about with Malik Willis, opening up the playbook. When you have safeties that are that versatile, I think there's going to be a big push to start having 3 safety rotations like we see kind of with Kansas City, kind of necessity in a lot of ways there. Daniel Sorensen's not a great option there, but almost more like a fully healthy Tampa Bay where they have 3 guys they can rotate in and use in different areas. I think you're going to start seeing defenses push more in that direction. And Brisker and Daxton Hill and Kyle Hamilton, of course, give you the ability to do that more efficiently. Trevor Penning, FCS guy, so you worry about the strength of competition, but has the size and a dominant PFF grade. I mean, he beat up on who he should, and that is an admirable trait in my eyes. The same thing I was talking about with Brady Christensen last year. He beat up on dudes who were worse than him. That's something we should, applaud. Sometimes guys play down a competition and they play up to it. Penning, we haven't gotten the opportunity to see him with a great matchup. This is a guy who, if he goes to one of the East-West Shrine Bowl or maybe the Senior Bowl, don't remember if he's totally a senior, but if he goes to one of those bowl games, we see him against better competition. That could really improve his stock. Travon Walker, unbelievable athlete, and looks like an edge rusher. And he's kind of catching the coattails of Georgia's defense, getting so much love, right, that Travon Walker is starting to become more and more of a household name in this draft process. Really intrigued by what he could be. My last mock draft, I had him going to Baltimore. Don't necessarily love that as like a need for the Ravens, but imagine him and Odafe Oweh opposite one another. Unbelievable athletes and a team that has a track record of producing high caliber edge rushers. That would be a lot of fun. Jahan Dotson, I'm starting to come around, right? He feels a little bit more explosive every time I watch him. He feels a little more sudden. His route running creates a whole lot of separation. I think he's more of these guys where maybe he's just a slot receiver at the next level, but where he makes his living in the 10 to 20 yard range, and maybe even underneath more. But I don't know about his big playability, so I think that's part of why I have him a little bit lower compared to some of the other wide receivers. Sam Howell, I know he plays in a very college-y offense, right? A lot of go routes, a lot of posts. He's had to use his legs a whole lot this year with UNC because they don't have a whole lot of fantastic weapons around him, at least not compared to what he was working with a year ago. So because of a depleted pass-catching options and the running backs being different, the offensive line hasn't been as good either. Howell's had to do a lot more on his own, which is admirable. But I think where you worry about Howell is he going to be able to immediately become a guy that could be a starting quarterback right away? because of the offense he plays in, I think he's probably a little bit more of a project. Maybe he sits for half a year, maybe he sits for an entire year, gets up to speed with not only an NFL offense, but the speed of the game. I think that's more of a beneficial route for Howell. But it feels like at this time of the year, we're always saying, hey, sit a quarterback for a year, let them learn, get them in this spot where they can, pick the brain of this starter, and then they'll be good by year 2. But then what always ends up happening is, you get a couple weeks in the year, the guy they're sitting behind isn't that great, and then boom, they're thrusted right in the thick of it. And sometimes trial by fire is the best way of going about it. Bernhard Raimann, huge, massive offensive lineman, and he's played really well for Minnesota. So looks like an NFL tackle, played like one, not necessarily for the best team, but Minnesota has been solid, and they play tough opponents. Bernhard Raimann has overall looked really good this year, and he wasn't on my first big board, so he's starting to make some progress there. And for the final 10 names, we'll talk about Brandon Smith, uber athletic linebacker, and Penn State has always been known for, Happy Valley produces a linebacker to the next level, and Brandon Smith could be the next one. Don't think he's quite instinctual as Devin Lloyd. I don't think he's quite as good of an athlete as Nakobe Dean, so he's kind of that mix between the two, but also a little bit of a step down. So still a really good football player, and I think he could work his way into the first round once we get those measurables. Myjai Sanders, I think this is another one of those guys, kind of like Odafe Oweh, where you're going to see the measurables and the athletic ability and the stuff he puts up at his pro day and combine. You're going to be like, all right, well, this guy, or Rashawn Gary might be an even better compliment or comparison, because it's like, okay, well, that guy's body and his potential given his athletic upside is a first-round pick. So he might work his way even higher up this draft board, but production hasn't been great. It's got, I think, a little bit better, and he looks a little better this year with Cincinnati. But part of that is also, how much of that is Cincinnati and their competition they're going against, but also that entire defense looks really good. Luke Fickell is a great defensive head coach. How much of that is himself getting better versus the situation's really good, and he naturally has just seen some positive progression in that area because of it. Kenneth Walker, my only running back on the board. Sorry, RBs, but Kenneth Walker's been fantastic. Great ad for Michigan State in the transfer portal. He's been something to watch here. Knows how to create room for himself, yards after contact, forced missed tackles. Kenneth Walker's been the guy in that area. Actually, when it comes to forced missed tackles, Kenneth Walker number 1. This is a PFF stat, and Malik Willis is number 2. Part of the reason I like Malik Willis a ton. Kyler Gordon, we're getting the other Washington corner. Again, I'm a big fan of these corners that come through Washington. They have a solid track record, and I just feel like I like watching how they play the game. This is a guy who, like McDuffie, not afraid to go get you at the line of scrimmage. Maybe not the biggest guy, but he'll play physical, and he's really clean in man-to-man coverage. And I see a very polished product. And again, someone's going to get him in the second round due to how many corners in this class, and I think it's going to be a really good snag. Darian Kennard, offensive lineman from Kentucky. I would say interior offensive lineman, but I think he's going to be one of these guys where maybe the Bengals end up with him late first round or in the second, or any offensive line needy team. I think it's great to have, if you're drafting this guy with the mindset of saying this guy's going to be a guard right away. Injuries happen and things come arise. And for Kennard to be able to say, hey, I can step in and play left tackle, or I can step in and play right tackle, that's a very valuable asset for a lot of teams. So I'm thinking interior offensive lineman, but with the ability to kick out and guard when you're in a pinch, and that in itself has a ton of value for NFL teams. Cameron Thomas, riding hot with the Aztecs. They didn't look great in their conference championship game, but he's gotten a lot of recognition of late at San Diego State, made that late regular season push. Haven't gotten a whole lot of Cameron Thomas under my tape watching belt, but intrigued to add more. But right here in this 46 to 50 range, you're seeing guys I either liked early on that have fallen off a little bit, or guys that hit on some of those traits. With Thomas and Ebiketie, good athletes, really strong guys. So I'm seeing potential bull rush skill sets with those two. Martin Emerson at 47, 6'2", long arms, plays in Mississippi State, plays in the SEC. Again, he's checking a lot of boxes that I'm biased towards. Kirkland and Strong are the two guys where I had him a lot higher in the first big board. And I still think Jackson Kirkland, right, like he was in that first round conversation for a reason. He played fantastic last year in a short Pac-12 season. Hasn't been as good this year. But I still think there's something to tap into where he could eventually become a starting left tackle in the NFL. And Carson Strong, I know he's not super mobile, and you have to worry about the knee injury and some of the background there. But when it comes to just heaving it down the field, him and Malik Willis might have the strongest arms in this class. And when it's just, hey, make this throw, he's pinpoint. I mean, like, Carson Strong can throw some dots. It just comes down to, hey, if he doesn't have time or the pocket, erodes in front of him, what does that look like? That is a concern for sure. But if you just think of Carson Strong like a computer, you input where you want the ball to go, Strong's going to get it there, and he's going to get it there with plenty of zip. So I'm still really intrigued by what he could be as an NFL quarterback. But that's going to do it for my 2022 Big Board 2.0. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. We'll run through it here one final time for you to look at it. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more sports content, hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teej, and I'm signing off.